Fans of the Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, thank you very much for joining me for the latest 8th edition Warhammer 40,000 Newsflash, and today's date is the 3rd of May 2017. So, we are going to go for the double hit, going to go in twice, going to try wrap it up in one today by looking at two separate posts that have appeared on the Warhammer community webpage today. I think there's a little bit of scrap code affecting Games Workshop's posting dates, because apparently one of these went up on the 2nd of May and one of them went up on the 3rd of May. The one from the 2nd of May, which is the fight phase, wasn't there on the 2nd of May, so you might need to check for a little bit of heretic influence there. Anyway, I will leave links in the description section to those articles. Before I get into this, I'd just like to thank everyone for all their interesting, humorous and hilarious, whether or not they're repeatable in polite conversation or not, suggestions for the new Super Marines. There's lots of funny ones. I mean, superhuman Marines armed with super weapons and super armor I thought was fantastic, because I like the word super. But there's loads of good ones. If you've got an idea for the new Super Marine or Gilliman's new toys, go back to that video and leave a comment on the video, and I'll collect those up and I'll come back. I'll do like a rundown of the finest names for new Marines once they get released, and I think that'll be quite funny. So into today's newsflash, two separate posts we're dealing with today. Firstly, the fight phase, and secondly, morale. Now, I think I've got it today in terms of the excellent graphics that I like to do for you guys. I've brought together the very best of the last few videos, and I think I've managed to pull it all together, and hopefully I won't disappoint any of you people by missing things, because, you know, a little colourful dots got missed last time, and, you know, that was terrible of me to forget them. So we've got our, you know, we've got a highlighter, you know, Stabilio boss doing their bit again. And we've got our colourful dots, and we've got quite a lot of text. So yeah, it's looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Oh, and background artwork as well. So everything has come together to give perhaps my finest ever 8th edition Newsflash graphics so far. Right, the fight phase. So this is the melee phase, so where you actually do the fighting if you're engaged in close combat. So we've already dealt with the charge phase separately. So the first point is something we already knew, in that units who charge fight first. Straightforward concept, and this also fits with the removal of the initiative statistic from a profile to reduce unnecessary characteristics in the game. That's fine. Now, I've got a question on this, or a question popped into my mind. So after the first turn, then who counts as charging in the second turn? You know, it seems like you can certainly be in a position where one side doesn't get destroyed, everyone stays locked in combat. So in that instance, do we need to track who the original charging unit was from turn to turn to make sure we remember that? It sounds like you do, but I don't know. Maybe one of you have heard something about that. If so, let me know. But it sounds like we need to keep a record of who charged first, so we don't forget who fights first. And basically what happens is all the close combats where people charge fight first. Then after that, we go into the fight phase. Each player takes in turns to activate a unit. Now, I wasn't entirely sure from reading the post as to whether or not you're allowed to activate a unit regardless, or if they have to already be locked in combat. It wasn't quite implicitly stated, or certainly in my mind it wasn't implicitly stated. But a unit that activates in the fight phase gets a 3-inch move, and then they're allowed to fight. And obviously remembering that if you get within 1 inch of an enemy, you are then in melee, so you can fight. There's no mention of pile-in moves, so it seems that those have got. This part here, this 3-inch move, if everybody gets to do it, then that's going to increase the pace of movement quite dramatically in the game. If it only applies to units that are already in combat, then it's kind of like the equivalent of the old pile-in move. But yeah, that's not clear in my mind yet. The key difference here seems to be that each side gets to do this and taking turns. So the turn phase is becoming less I go, you go. That boosts the rate of melee combat, and I think will act as a balancing factor for melee focused armies against shooting, where you can only shoot when it's your own turn. Okay, the next point is around weapon characteristics and skills. So the first thing is all units will now have fixed to hit rolls, so this is no longer a relative battle of combatant skill. If you hit on a 2+ and your enemy hits on a 2+, you will both hit on a 2+. So yeah, elite units are going to knock 10 bells out of each other rather quickly, it seems to me. Whereas poor quality units, if you've got a unit that hits on a 4 or 5+, their combats are going to be much slower it seems. The other thing mentioned is they say that more weapons are going to have armor penetrating capability in close combat. At the moment, in general, only specialized melee weapons have actual anti-armor capability. Most weapons have no armor capability when you're fighting in melee, and that means that units typically get their full saving throw. This is a mechanic that made guardsmen and the equivalent much tougher in the current iteration of rules when the AP system came in, because if a guardsman's fighting a marine, that guardsman gets a 5+ armor saving throw against the marine's standard attacks, be it if a marine is fighting with a close combat weapon or his bolt pistol. And particularly also with pistols being able to be used in close combat, that could change this a bit, although we would guess from what we've seen on a bolt gun, a standard pistol won't have any AP, but a plasma pistol certainly will. An Inferno pistol definitely will. But we haven't got any details around that yet, so we need to see those first to understand this in more detail. And the final thing was a special case observation to say that there will be special rules that allow models to strike early. I guess there'll be various tyrannid creatures who will strike particularly quickly because they're very fast. Demons maybe, etc, etc. So I'm guessing that's similar to what we have already in 40k, that there are lots of special rules. Hopefully though, what we'll see is most of those special rules ditched and just a few more specific case ones brought in their place. So that is the fight phase. What do I think about that? Well, that sounds to me a bit like I said for the shooting phase, that the lethality is going to increase in 8th edition. So what's driving up the lethality? Well, firstly, accuracy is going to be greater with fixed hit rolls as opposed to relative hit rolls. I think we're going to see a lot of troops now that are hitting on a 3+, particularly if you're fighting with Marines. I suspect that may well be their default to hit roll. And this extra movement, it sounds on the face of it like that's going to increase the rate at which things move. And we're also going to have more weapons with AP that you can use in melee as well. Yeah, this is another part of 8th that is going to accelerate the lethality of the combat system. So that is the fight phase. And moving rapidly on and in sequence from the fight phase, we go to our double hitter, the post about the morale phase. So this is actually quite straightforward, and morale in Warhammer 40,000 is going to be enormously simplified compared to what we have at the moment. The first key thing is you will only ever take a single test per turn. So I imagine this will be right at the end of a turn after the fight phase has been completed. There'll be no morale test, say, in the shooting phase for taking casualties. We don't know if we'll have special case rules such as pinning, which we currently have. We'll have to see about that. But in terms of taking a morale check from casualties, that is only going to be once a turn. The way this works is you'll roll a d6, you'll add the number of casualties you've sustained in the turn, so this will be shooting and melee casualties. Important note, very important note that. So if you take casualties from Overwatch fire and then take casualties in melee, they're all going to stack up to affect your morale roll. If that is greater than your leadership, you fail and you take a number of casualties, which is equivalent to the excess on that result. So let's take an average human. Let's take an example from the current rules of an average human, so a guardsman with a leadership of 7. Let's say the guardsman's unit sustains 4 casualties in a turn. So they have to take a morale check because they've taken casualties. They roll the d6 and they get a 6. So they get 4 casualties plus the morale test result of a 6 is 10, minus their leadership of 7 leaves 3. So they just take 3 extra casualties and 3 dudes vanish, or dudettes, depending. That's how it's going to work. A much simpler dynamic there on the morale. Units, you're never going to see units run away. You will kind of see, as they take casualties, as they'll sort of start to fade away as people, as troops in effect run away. I think I made this observation much earlier when I was talking about 8th. This is going to be a little bit like how morale works in the current kill team, whereby every single soldier or warrior involved in the battle has to take an individual morale check once you get below half value. What I've found is you kind of, once you get to that threshold, your dudes just start disappearing, and each turn the effectiveness of your unit erode. I guess the other thing with not falling back, units that are involved in heavy combat are potentially just going to get minced and really quickly, and also ones could get shot up really quickly. We've got the fallback rule for close combat. We've not got anything equivalent for shooting. Your squad will just stand there and get shot away until either they're all killed by direct hits or they've all run away. Not seen anything yet to say what happens if there's like any last man standing. We will have to see if we get a bit more detail around that soon. So there you go, that's 2 phases dealt with in today's bulletin, the fight phase and the morale phase, both closely linked. So what do I think of these? Interesting. The fight phase, in terms of the accelerated lethality, fits with what we've already got. I like the idea of having more weapons with armor penetration capabilities, because I think that is a shortcoming in the current rule set. It should be much more intuitive. On the flip side, there's some details that in what information GW has shared so far that are gaps in how this part of the turn works at the moment. So I'm kind of withholding judgment a bit yet. Seems in line, and if you're going to make the shooting phase more lethal, then why not make the fight phase more lethal as well? And then the morale, well, I quite like the morale. It kind of gives you this capability for just a handful of your dudes to keep fighting in a shot up squad. Much easier to deal with, I think, overall, and don't think it's simplified compared to what we've got at the moment. The other thing I like about it is we move to a single D6 roll, which eliminates the problems with a result based on 2d6. If you roll 2d6, you have a non-linear probability curve in terms of the results you get. So effect of modifiers and the effect of certain leadership values is not gradational. So increasing your leadership by 1 point from 7 to 8 is not the same as going from 6 to 7 or from 5 to 6, you know, all that sort of thinking. And if you do a probability sequence outcome for 2d6, you'll understand that. So going to a single d6 means it is a linear effect, and it all depends on this casualties. So I like that. I like the smoothness. There's 2 things though about this that potentially mean more something new you're going to have to bookkeep and monitor. And first is who charged first, and secondly, and very importantly, you will need to keep a track of all casualties each unit gets in a turn. So when you do get to that morale phase, you know exactly what penalty you're up against for that test. Whereas before we've had tests whereby take casualties over a threshold, so 25% in the case of shooting, you have to take a test. Or in the case of melee, if you get defeated, you have to take a test. Now it's you have to take a test if you take any casualties, but the number of casualties you've received affects the outcome of that. So a subtle point there, but something that we need to think about in terms of how we bookkeep and track the course of a turn when we're actually playing a game. So those are my thoughts on these 2 new bits of rules. I think it's going to be a couple of days before we get anything new. So I think they're doing some lore tomorrow, and then they are going to come back and start to talk about army types, e.g. what will a battle-forged army do. And it was also mentioned that battle-forged armies can have benefits in this area. What do you think of these 2 new phases, the fight phase and the morale phase? I'll be very interested here. Put your ideas, thoughts, comments down in the comment section. Thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.